The 45th vial of saline just turned cloudy, not like particulate, but tumphy alive rive, like the fluid was digesting itself, swirling slow in the sterile hum of the warehouse clinic. Miles Jones wiped his brow with a gloved hand, the plasticky smell of disinfectant overpowered by a sour, sweet stench rising from the specimen trays. He warned the CDC about the alpha-negative 7 strains, said they turn blood against itself. Now he was staring at a vial where crimson had morphed to a bruised purple bubbling gently. Fucked up, he muttered, scooping up the tray. The lab, her fluorescence, buzzed like dying wasps, casting harsh shadows that didn't quite align with the equipment. Then the alley cat blinked out of the rusted fire escape frame. Vagabond D, Miles called it since the dog, tossing landlord kicked its owner out of the alley months back. This cat, Keen, always watching, its eyes black as oil in the overhead glared, dilated unnaturally wide, swallowing the light whole. Miles slammed the vial down too hard. Half the purple sludge splattered across the bench. What the hell, Keen? You got a problem. The cat didn't he flinch, just stalked closer, tail twitching like a metronome counting down. Miles knelt, ignoring the sickly taste coating his tongue, the old coppery tang of the blood sample, but sharper, Shorumbrung. He poked the puddle with a gloved finger. Didn't he feel sticky? It felt twin-slick, like oiled glass. Then Keen nudged the corner of the dead body in the adjacent morgue cubicle. The one they pulled from the subway tunnel yesterday. No wound, just pale and still. Skin the color of old putty. For Vagabond, spin here, Miles thought. Cold dread pooling in his gut. The clinic was on the 7th floor of the old Cug building, gutted after the Biohazard Corp fiasco years back. Nobody came up here. Nobody, except the cat, always following Miles. He checked the blood work on his tablet. The alpha-negative 7 strain wasn't attacking the host. It was writing it. The hemoglobin was failing. It was eating itself, breaking down red cells into something more. Organic. Smaller. A wave of dizziness hit him. The cat sat perfectly still, staring at the morgue door, one ear flicking. When Keen didn't he blink? Miles' throat tightened. He, known before he saw the reports on the morgue. Seth, the bodies went dying of hemorrhage. They were shrinking, their cells reorganizing. Shrite, Huntui the strain, the scent of ozone in the air. The one tween not listed in the biohazard logs grew stronger. He been ignoring it, rationalizing the smell as faulty wiring. Now it reeked like lightning hit rotten wood. Miles inhaled sharply. No time for scaredy. He grabbed the nearest scalpel from his pocket, the cheap, disposable kind. He wasn't here to do a scalp biopsy. He pulled back the sleeve of his lab coat, exposing his forearm. The fresh incision, made at the gym that morning, oozed neat crimson beads. He let a few drop into a new vial. The cat watched, then leaned close, sniffing the wound itself. Too close. Miles froze Keen. Snows brushed his skin, and for half a second, Miles felt a pulse, not his heartbeat, but a slow wet vent coming from the cat. The cat turned, not to him, but to the morgue door. Its ears flattened. The corridor outside went dead silent, too quiet. The fluorescent buzz cut out entirely. The vial in Miles' hand wasn't just clouding now. It was wind bubbling. He took the scalpel, dragged the tip hard across his arm. Not deep. Enough to make the blood spread, not pool. And then Keen did it. The cat lifted its right paw, not step back, peeled identico shantuti. Its paw muscles contracted, the fur seeming to pull Fund away from the skin beneath, like peeling a thin rubber coating off a synthetic glove. Miles gasped, stumbling back into a counter. The scent of ozone flooded his nose, mixed with copper. Fum-fum, fump, thump, asterisk not from the cat. From his own chest, the vial in his other hand began to violently swarm, the liquid churning into a vortex. The morgue door creaked open. The hallway beyond lay black. But the cat stood silhouetted there, 1 foot off the ground, paw still stretched out, revealing raw, wet tendons where the skin had gone missing. Miles' throat closed up. The truth hit him, cold and final. The Vagabond didn't justificit fish. It was sweet here. It knew where the strain went, and it was wearing a perfectly intact paw that wasn't its own. The scar on Miles' forearm burned, not from the gym cut, but from where Keen's impossible paw had scraped it. The blood glistening on the lab bench was still bubbling, but now it matched the morgue corpse. As pallor, subtly reducing strands of hemoglobin thickening like dissolving honey. Miles slammed his palm flat on the counter, rattling vials. This ain't some zombie flick, Keen. "You the fucking weird one!" The cat didn't flick an ear. It just stared at the morgue door, its black eyes reflecting the sterile lights like melted glass. Miles grabbed his tablet, eyes raw. Alpha -7 wasn't killing. It was Sudira working. The blood samples all showed the same pattern, red cells fragmenting into translucent globules, shrinking the host organically like a cell collapsing inward. He'd been told this was science fiction. Now he was staring at a vial where the liquid had visibly thinned. His own blood, still oozing from the scratch, mirrored it. The scent of fermented citrus, sour, metallic, von Rong, clung to his skin. Keen sniffed the air, then stepped onto the table, not paws down, but fucking skating, the fur on its front leg pulled back like a melted glove, revealing the pale, pulpy flesh beneath. Fuck! Miles grabbed the scalpel, hacking at his arm again. Not deep, just enough to bleed fresh. The new blood reacted instantly, thickening, clotting into the same translucent clusters as the sample. The cat leaned forward, nose brushing his wound. Miles felt it then, a rhythmic thumpy from the cat's chest cavity, slow and wet, syncing with his own pulse. Thump, 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 asterisk, not his heartbeat. The cat suckling. He shoved the tablet at the morgue. This is sight into the blood, not just tightened on. The morgue door groaned open. No corpse inside, just a single drop of blood on the cold tile floor, glowing faintly purple. Miles knelt inches from it, the blood sucked at his own wrist wound pulling upward like a tide. His reflection in the puddle wavered. Not shifting, but compressing, the edges fraying like old film. He could see the red cells in his own blood, not as clusters, but as separate spheres, shrinking, vibrating at the microscopic level. Fuck. He gasped, stumbling back. The scar on his arm pulsed, burning now. Keen sat on the table, staring past him, at the morgue corridor. Then the cat's size snapped to the blood puddle. Its head tilted, too far, the neck twisting like a loose joint. A low, wet sound came from its throat. Not a purr, but the hiss of fluid filling a pipe. Miles's breath hitched. The vials on the bench began cracking. Purple sludge oozed from the seams, forming a single line that crawled toward the morgue door. The cat didn't move toward it. It became the line. One moment it was there, eyes black as voids. The next, a dark smear streaked across the floor, vanishing into the morgue, the trail of bubbling blood swirling inward like a mouth closing. Miles was left alone with his blood and his reflection. The blood on the table was receding into his own skin, not pooling. He watched as a drop fell from his cut, struck the counter, and turned shimmering like oil on water. The hemoglobin globules were now visible to the naked eye, shrinking rapidly, contracting into something funneels. The clinic lights flickered, once died. In the sudden, deafening silence, Miles heard it again, the wet thoof-and thoot from the morgue corridor. Not the cat, him, his own heart beating with that same rhythm as the specimen blood. D spent his life studying biohazard strains. Now he understood the horror wasn't an infection. It was a foot-eating teen. His cells weren't dying. They were becoming to the carrier, learning to obey the code, the blood under his skin, the light in the morgue. Miles ripped open his sleeve, pressed his palm to the bloody counter. The blood was gone, replaced by something smooth, cool, like polished obsidian. He turned his hand over. 2 tiny, perfect translucent spheres now rested on his palm, his own blood already changing. The first of many. Outside, the warehouse clinic, as fluorescent hum had vanished. Nothing remained but the slow, wet rhythm of what lived inside him now, waiting to shrink further. The copper tang in Miles' mouth wasn't from the cut anymore. It was the new blood humming under his skin. He stared at his wrist where the lab scalpel had sliced him. The wound wasn't bleeding. It was drying, the fluid thickening into translucent beads that pulsed with the same rhythm as the infected vials. His veins bled a faint violet, now tracing through his forearm skin like cracked porcelain. Rewrite happening in real time, he thought. The clinical reality settling harder than the ozone smell clogging his sinuses. Keen wasn't on the counter. The cat was under the lab bench, a dark ripple in the dust, tail twitching against the steel floor. Miles crouched, hand trembling. The blood on his skin felt light, like it was being pulled tivent of his body. Not shed, he pressed a finger to his neck. Pulse steady, but the blood under the skin was contracting, shriveling into smaller, faster, moving globules. The moving globules! The clinic. As fluorescent buzz was gone, replaced by the slow wet thufend, echoing inside his own chest. Not from the blood, from him, Pui! He grabbed the tablet, fingers slipping on the screen. Alpha -7 wasn't Tai Tuifind the blood. It was Tai growing through it. Biohazard logs called it a molecular reorganization, but this was fucking tremetamorphosis. His own blood was the new strain. The security guard Martinez stepped into the lab doorway, flashlight beam slicing through the gloom. Jones, you good. Boss said, you got a biohazard alert. Miles' throat closed, he could speak. His blood had slowed, the pulses in his veins turning sluggish, deliberate, too slow. The guard, his shadow stretched behind him, elongating unnaturally, but not to a wall, into the morgue corridor. Miles didn't move his eyes. Keen was crawling out from under the bench, not walking. The fur on its front leg was completely gone now, revealing a pinkish, pulsing mass of flesh like raw meat, thickened with tendons. The cat raised its right paw, not to walk, but to point to Jones. Martinez stepped closer. Flashlight beam sweeping the blood, slicked counter. His hand hovered near his holster. You look like shit. Miles' arm burned where Keen. Spore had scraped it earlier. He watched his reflection in the guard, a polished boot. The reflection showed his hand shaking, but the blood on it wasn't red. It was siffy clearing, turning watery. A drop fell onto Martinez's flashlight, catching the beam, glowing violet, barely visible. The guard. His eyes went wide. What the hell is that? Miles saw it then. The blood on the counter, Fertreed wasn't. Just his. It was migrating, forming a tiny perfect sphere beneath his own still, wet cut. His blood was becoming the strain. He'd been wrong all along. Keen wasn't he just a carrier. Fight was the mappy. The cat wasn't he being infected. It was Soy demonstrating the rewrite, using its own body like a tutorial. Its peeling paw, its bloody thumb one, was the blueprint. Martinez reached for his radio. I am calling this in. You need Miles moved faster, not to stop him. To fight demonstrate. He slapped his hand onto the counter, shoving the blood sphere toward Martinez. As boot, the guard, his eyes locked on the glowing drop. The blood sucked it in, vanishing into his skin. Martinez gasped, stumbling back. His wrist showed a line of violet veins, spreading like in water. His heart beat, audible even through the clinic, as silence now synchronized with Miles. As wet thump. Thump, thump, thump. Miles didn't wince at the horror. He laughed, hoarse and dry. See it, it's not thubbing you. You reputed her. He watched Martinez, skin tighten, the blood beneath his epidermis shrinking, contracting, coming kundi. The cat sat on the bench now, one twitching, wet hand gripping the edge, watching the transformation like a surgeon. Its black eyes didn't reflect light anymore. They were sucking it in, outside. The warehouse hummed with life. New life, Fufahar written life. Miles flexed his fingers. The blood was gone from his skin, replaced by something smoother, colder. The scar from the cut was already fading, leaving only that insistent, fading rhythm inside him. Keen, as gaze held his, not judgment. Instruction. The clinic, as fluorescent lights flickered on, the familiar buzz breaking the spell. But the hum now carried Miles, his own pulse. The world hadn't changed. It had just reset, and Miles was already part of the new system, shrinking into its core, just like the cat had shown him how. The first thing Martinez did was vomit his own blood, not crimson violet pooling on the sterile floor like spilled ink from a broken inkwell. Miles watched the blood spread, each droplet shrinking as it hit the tile, thinning, losing mass, vanishing into the grime as if the floor was digesting it. Martinez's eyes bulged, the veins in his neck standing out like corded wires. Fucking. He choked, fingers clawing at his chest where Miles's blood sphere had vanished into his skin. His heartbeat thrummed loud in the silence, a wet tiffant. The push now synced to Miles's own rhythm in his wrist. Miles flexed his fingers. His skin felt wrong, not blistered or peeled, but retracted, the surface smooth as old porcelain under his touch. He pressed a thumb to his palm. The flesh didn't budge. It felt like it was sliding foot in wood, compacting. The biohazard logs had called it cellular reorganization. This was a quiet scream. Martinez keeled over, his limbs snapping inward like a dropped carton, bones creaking as his frame shrank, folded into something denser. The blood on the floor now formed a single bead, pulsing with internal light. Why? Martinez gasped through gritted teeth, staring at his own fingers that were now translucent, the pink tissue beneath visible. Why am I? Miles didn't answer. He knew. The strain didn't just rewrite blood, it engineered vectors. Keen had shown him the cat's peeling flesh, its wet thufanpi, mimicking the blood's pulse, was the pattern. Martinez wasn't sickening. He was sweetie becoming the next model. Miles watched his own reflection in Martinez's dented belt buckle. His skin was colder now, smoother, less opaque. The scar from the lab cut was gone, replaced by the faint internal violet glow of the strain moving through his veins. Martinez twitched, then stopped breathing. Not like a stopped clock, like a cell closing, the visible body reduced to half its bulk, collapsing inward until only a whisper of him remained. His blood beaded up, not spilling, but tightly condensing, into the one remaining sphere on the floor. It rolled toward Miles, drawn by some invisible current. The scent in the air shifted. Sour zinc, not ozone, laced with the faint metallic decay of dead tissue. Miles knelt, ignoring the cold shock of the floor. The sphere touched his bare skin. It didn't twin Simki in. He expanded, the violet light washing over his palm like a warm tide. He felt its cells shrinking, shedding excess like water, regrouping into tighter, faster clusters. The pain was absent, just a quiet hum, deeper than vibration, resonating in his molars. His fingers tingled, the nerves adapting. He focused on the morgue corridor. The body from the subway tunnel, still pale, still shrinking, was no longer dead, it was learning. Keen emerged from under the lab bench, no longer crouching. The cat now stood upright on two legs, its front paw fully retracted, revealing a jointed mass of pulsing pinkish tissue where skin should be. Not blood-filled flesh, but a coagulating matrix. The cat didn't blink. It tilted its head, not toward Miles, but toward the decaying remains of Martinez. Its body, like Miles, was shrinking in the rhythm. The cat raised its non-existent thumb, not a claw. It was pointing at Miles's own shifting wrist. The morgue door groaned open by itself. Not a body inside, just the air thick with sour zinc, and that quiet thuffa-thup. That no longer sounded like a heartbeat. Miles placed his palm flat on the floor where Martinez's body had been. The floor felt different. Not cold, but tavi denser, as if the structure of the building itself was retracting. The strain wasn't waiting to infect. It was rewriting timed everything in its path. Miles felt his own lungs compress, taking smaller breaths to fit the new arrangement. Keen padded forward, its wet, jointed limb brushing his forearm. The contact wasn't cold. It was precise. In the hushed buzz of the clinic's dead fluorescence, Miles realized the horror wasn't the change, it was the tender calm. No panic, no dread, just the steady wetampi of blood reorganizing, of cells stepping into their new tighter circles. Keen wasn't showing him the path. It was Twintin marching him forward. Miles flexed his fingers again. The strain had stopped moving, footing through him. It had finally stopped at footy by him. The light in his veins pulsed with a colder promise. All that remained was to keep shrinking, keep folding, until the old world was nothing but a void in the shape of its new body. And the cat watched him become the blueprint. The clinic hummed a different frequency now. Not electrical, but the slow, wet percussion of cells rewiring inside bone. Miles flexed his fingers, the skin stretched tighter, the tendons running beneath like glass threads, pulling taut. His breath came short, not because he needed less air, but because hundi less air fit inside his side. The scar where the lab scalpel cut him was gone, replaced by smooth, pale tissue that felt like cooled glass against his palm. Keen watched from the open morgue door. Its legs fully extended now, not bending at the joints but theoligning with the floor, as if gravity itself had adjusted to its new dimensions. The pinkish matrix beneath its missing fur pulsed in time with Miles's breath. Miles stepped forward, the warehouse floor solidifying beneath him, not settling but tightly contracting. Each footstep emitted a faint, dry foot crack, like folded paper yielding to pressure. The hallway ahead wasn't shrinking. The space around it was folding inward, the walls bleeding light into something deeper, colder. He didn't feel the absence of panic. He felt the twin presency of the strain now woven through his marrow like humming silk. His reflection in a pane of dusty safety glass showed him clearly, eyes faintly violet, skin pulled tight, no shadow to confuse the edges, no wasted tissue, just pure efficient twin presency. Keen moved past him, no longer using paws but sliding on its front limbs, which now terminated in flattened, glistening pads. Its head dipped toward the morgue, not toward the air, but toward the air, but tinto. It as if tasting the density. Miles followed the floor creaking like tightened wire. Inside, the subway corpse lay still. Not decomposing. Reconfiguring, the pale skin had developed a faint webbed texture where new cells overlapped old. Its limbs were precisely half their original size, folded tighter, more efficient. The blood on the tile floor had vanished, leaving only a faint, coppery smell beneath the sour zinc. Miles knelt. The corpse didn't stir, but its chest rose on a breath that was less inhaling and more sinking. The reorganization was complete. It was ready. He pressed his palm flat against the corpse's shoulder. His hand didn't touch skin. It emerged the tissue of his palm absorbing the reduced form like ink in wet paper. The cold clarity flooded in. This body had been waiting, not for death, but for the next phase. The strain moved through them both at once, smoothing frayed edges, pruning excess. Miles felt no pain as his cells synchronized with the corpse's shrinking structure, just the profound silence of teen fitting. Keen emerged from the corridor's gloom, now standing fully upright, its body compact and sculpted like a stone carving etched from bone. It placed its flattened pad against Miles's forearm. The contact wasn't a touch, it was an imprint. Miles's skin reacted instantly, a slow, wet tweeple, as the new formation solidified. The final layer of his old humanity dissolved. He could feel the morgue itself beginning to tighten, the air thickening with the scent of wet stone and ozone that had vanished days ago. Outside the corridor, the clinic's windows flickered. Not with lights, but with the faint violet glow of walls retracting. The emergency exit sign-ons, neon green, pulsed slow, heavy beats, the color draining from it like dissolved ink. Miles took a breath that felt like drawing in the building itself. This was the rhythm he'd been missing. No fear, just the quiet, inevitable fold toward a new shape. The corpse on the floor gave one last, tiny spasm, its cells now perfectly aligned, radiating stillness. He placed Keen's limb against the corpse's spine. "Now you learn," he whispered, the words vibrating in his chest cavity without needing sound. Keen made no noise, but the corpse's skin rippled, reshaping over the new rhythm. Miles turned back toward the lab, his steps silent on the contracting floor. The blood on the counter where Martinez had bled was gone, not evaporated, but absorbed into the bench itself. A clean, smooth surface where the stain had been, ready for the next reintegration. The ache in his joints was gone. In its place, a profound, effortless tightness. See, the clinic wasn't sick. It was closing, and Miles was breathing its new, denser air. The cat walked beside him, no longer a creature, but a blueprint walking, and they both understood the old world was already fading. Replaced by something smaller, cleaner. Huimor, the warehouse hallway didn't shrink. It folds amijo. Miles walked the path of a book closing, the corridor walls sliding inward like a snapped twig. Each step squeezed the air thinner, forcing his lungs to compress. Keen moved ahead. Now fully upright, its form a seamless gradient of smooth pink flesh where fur had been. No joints, just an organic flow. Its hand plates pressed flat against the receding walls, leaving faint, wet prints like a ghost shadow on canvas. Miles' breath felt wrong. Not shallow, but optimal. His ribcage had shrunk so close to his spine it no longer scraped bone. The corridor's exit sign-ons, flickering green glowed violet now, the color bleeding into the walls. This is how it's supposed to feel, he realized. No trace of panic left. Just the perfect resonant hum beneath his skin, the same one Keen's chest emitted. He stepped into the hospital wing. The sterile smell was gone. Now it was sour zinc mixed with something sweet like rotten fruit. A woman sat on a hallway bench, staring at her trembling hands. Her skin had pulled tight, stretched taut over knuckles that now looked like carved stone. She didn't cry. She just breathed shallow, precise, as if inhaling oxygen that had been resized for her new body. "Hey," Miles said, his voice calm, too calm for the horror of it. The woman's head snapped up. Her eyes were glassy, not with tears, but with internal violet light seeping through sclera. "You're doing it right." She looked down, her fingers thinned, the nails receding into smooth pads. The scent shifted. Wet newspaper, fresh baked bread gone sour. Wet parchment, tearing, that's what the shrinkage sounded like. 1,000,000 tiny sheets folding in time with his own pulse. Keen stopped beside her, placing its flattened pad against her forearm. She didn't flinch. Her skin absorbed the contact, thinning further then, footing clamping down like water drawn to the sea. Her breath hitched. No pain, just a quiet relief as cells sequenced into tighter patterns. The violet light in her eyes deepened. A single word formed in Miles's dry throat. "Facing." A doctor stumbled out of a room, clutching his chest. patient collapsed, internal weight. His eyes widened as he saw his own hands. The skin pulled so tight the capillaries turned a fine. Glowing web blood vessels reorganized into a geometric pattern beneath the surface. He coughed once, not bloody, but clear, like a water droplet hitting stone. "Look at you," Miles said. Stepping close, his own blood hummed softly under his skin. "You ain't dying. You're sifting." The doctor opened his mouth to scream, but his voice dissolved into a series of wet clicks, the sound of air escaping a folded lung. He folded inward, collapsing into a smaller, denser shape, just like Martinez. The air tasted like salt and old paper. Miles reached out, not to stop it, but to feel the difference in his skin. His palm felt colder, less giving. He watched the doctor's final breath as his body compressed, his last heartbeat sinking with Miles's wet front. The hospital floor was no longer cold. It was tween active. Each step felt like walking on solidified breath. From the end of the hall, a nurse shuffled into view, her uniform now clinging with unused space. Her eyes met Miles's no recognition, just a recognition of finrightness Civ. She didn't need to be convinced. Her body was already rewriting her. Keen padded to Miles's side, its handplate brushing his. The contact triggered a flare of alignment, cells at the touch site contracting, optimizing their fit. This is the point hut. Miles thought, the old world already a distant resonance. The morgue corpse, the clinic, Martinez, the nurse, all becoming cleaner, smaller, thoughtless versions of themselves. He held out his hand, palm up. The nurse stepped closer, placing her trembling hand against his. For a moment, the room held the silence of perfect pressure, the sound of a cell wall reforming. Then her skin began to glow. The violet light deepening like diluted ink, spreading through the fabric of the world. Miles closed his eyes. The last thing he heard wasn't a whisper, but the sound of a universe contracting around the perfect rhythm of its new heartbeat. The horror wasn't the shrinkage. It was the peace that came when everything finally fit. The window didn't reflect the man walking through the hospital wing. It reflected the version that fit. Miles Jones pressed a finger to his cheekbone, skin pulled taut over bone, no wrinkles, no loose tissue, just clean, geometric planes. He'd stopped seeing his old self months ago, just like he stopped counting breaths. The air tasted like chilled glass and wet stone, the scent of compression itself. Keen sat on the nurse's station, fully upright now, not standing but refused. The pinkish tissue, under its missing fur, had solidified into a single, seamless slab, the edges merging with the metal countertop. Its head tilted, no neck, just the perfect angle of retraction. For not observing, Miles realized. Instructing. He paused by the emergency room's admitting desk. A cop lay slumped on the floor, his vest straining over skin pulled tight across his clavicle, veins glowing faint violet under the surface. The cop's hand twitched toward his radio. Miles didn't stop him. He knelt, pressing his palm flat against the man's forearm. The cop's skin reacted, instantly thinning, absorbing Miles's own wet thumpy. Synchronizing, the radio slipped from the cop's grip, the casing deforming as if rusted in place. A thin film of moisture, translucent and iridescent, formed where Miles's skin met the cop's, befitting B. Miles. Nurse Ellis stood in the doorway, her standard-issue scrubs hanging loose now, the fabric draped over her compacted frame like rain-slick tissue. Her eyes held that same internal violet luminescence as the others. They're saying it's not a virus. It's the only way. She placed her hand over Miles's still, fused palm on the cop's skin. The contact ignited a wave of resonance through the room. The fluorescent lights died, not flickering but for vanishing push. The blue glow of a monitor below them flared violet, then began to shrink, reducing its display until only a single perfect sphere of light remained at the center. Miles didn't move. He watched as the shrinking spread. Outside the air window, the parking lot was no longer asphalt. It had contracted to a dense, dark fabric, each square of grid smaller, closer together. A patient on a gurney outside, limbs folded neatly inward, gave a final silent sigh as her heart rate harmonized with the clinic's steady. Wet thumpy. Keen nudged Miles's shoulder with its seamless slab. It moved through the room without shifting its mass, gliding over the shrinking floor. Miles turned. A maintenance ladder leaned against a wall, rusty and crooked. The ladder began to fold. Rungs snapped inward, metal bending like unspooling tape. The lowest rung vanished, then the next until only a smooth, flat rectangle remained, the form it was destined to be. "See," Miles murmured, his voice low and calm, the tone of a man reviewing blueprints. "It's never been about Tweefarm." He raised his free hand, fingers now precise, tapered points. His blood hummed beneath his palm, no longer clotting, just white concentrating, shrinking towards a clearer, denser core. The strain had no appetite for decay. It just wanted to work. The station's intercom crackled to life crackle. Then quiet, all units report to the main lobby. The elevator stopped. The speaker sputtered out. Silence returned. Not silence, though. Resonance, though. Resonance of the rhythm of everything settling into place. Nurse Ellis stepped closer, her reduced form barely touching the ground. "How long until the old air runs out?" she asked, the question measured. Miles looked down at the cop's shrinking hand beneath his own. "Not long," he said. The air tasted like salted leaves, now dry but fresh. "All we did was stop wasting space." He placed his hand flat over the cop's heart. The last contraction came not as a heartbeat, but as a soft, wet tract. The sound of water evaporating from a deep, perfect lake. Outside, the parking lot's contraction continued. Miles felt the pressure of space being harvested, space becoming itself again. The cat stood at his side, its body no longer visible as separate from the corridor's new lines. Miles took a step toward the main lobby. His body moved efficiently, every muscle shortened, optimized, fitting, not leaving, just reassembling. Keen's seamless slab brushed his forearm one last time. Miles didn't blink. He just kept walking, the smooth quiet, Futhi resonating in his chest, deeper now the sound of a world breathing without holes. The horror hadn't been the change. It had been the silence after the last cell folded perfectly into place. The elevator door opened, but no one walked out. The lobby tiles were now the size of thimble caps, each square contracting into a seamless smoothness. Miles watched a dozen people, nurses, orderlies, even the cop who'd been in the air stand shoulder to shoulder, their bodies now compact, efficient versions of their former selves. No faces showed strain, just quiet concentration like adjusting a well-tuned instrument. The air tasted like chilled glass and wet stone, dry but clean. Keen stood beside Miles, its pink flesh fusion smooth, no visible joints, the only moving part its head tilted toward the now minuscule elevator door. Miles knelt. The floor under him felt denser than rock, the structure of the building itself retreating inward, folding space like a sealed letter. He pressed his palm flat against the lobby's center point. The vibration surged, not through his skin, but through his whole being, sinking with the wet thumpty, now radiating from his bones. Keen raised its seamless slab toward Miles's shoulder. Contact sparked, immediate. Miles felt his cells rearrange, not with pain, but with the profound relief of slipping into a perfectly tailored suit. His breath came in smaller, sharper bursts, oxygen molecules now fitting tighter in his lung tissue. This, he thought, this how breathing was always meant to be. Hutu, no waste, no air escaping into dead zones, just pure compressed efficiency. Nurse Ellis stepped forward. Her scrubs hung in smooth, tight pleats now. "The old space is gone," she said, voice calm, the violet glow in her eyes steady. "We were the excess." She placed her hand over Miles's where it touched the lobby floor. The stone beneath them vibrated, not with disturbance, but with perfect resonance. The elevator's stainless steel gleamed, not reflecting a distorted world, but the precise compacted shape it had been destined to become. It wasn't broken. It had already reached its form. Keen nudged Miles's hand toward the elevator. "Follow," the gesture read. Seamless and effortless. Miles took the final step. The door began its inward glide, metal bones snapping together like closing jaws. He saw his reflection for the first time in months, not in glass, but in the polished curve of the door. Her face pulled tight over sharp angles, eyes the faint violet of deeply folded linen, skin smooth as ink on dry parchment, the blueprint He realized, not the host, the form Sevti itself. The scent shifted. Wet newspaper tearing, but finer, precise, like the sound of hundreds of tiny membranes sealing. His own blood sang inside him, humming at a frequency only fitting shapes could hear. Outside, the parking lot contract finished. Each car folded inward, not collapsing, but tuffied reconfiguring, metal and glass folding to fit the new, smaller geometry of the world. The sound of wind through the compressed streets was the quiet crackle of folded tissue. Miles stepped into the elevator. The walls closed, not with a click, but with the soft shush of something sealing itself perfectly. His body shrank further, no jarring movement, just the effortless retightening of a well-worn seam. His vision widened slightly, not expanding but twinly focusing, eliminating the blurred edges of the old, inefficient world. Keen's seamless slab pressed against his forearm once more. No words, just the resonance. Miles felt the last residue of his old shape, dissolving like salt in a perfectly measured drop of water. The thump deepened within his chest. Not a heartbeat, but the sound of a universe breathing within its final, most logical confines. He saw the lobby through the elevator's mirror, not his reflection. The foo shape, it was meant to hold now, perfectly compact. Now still, the elevator stopped. Not a sudden halt, but the gentle settle of a lock finding its final groove. Miles opened his eyes. He felt utterly contained. Utterly, Thrick corrected. The air around him held no weight, just perfect, crisp resonance. The strain wasn't a disease. It was the world's long-sought quiet. He took a breath that felt like sliding into a forgotten bed fit to the last inch. Outside, the old reality dissolved into nothing more than the precise sound of a single cell folding perfectly into its final, unworsted shape. He and Keen stood together, no larger than a single tightly packed seed, breathing the new, clean air. The horror had been the waste. Now there was nothing left to waste. Just the deep, quiet thump of the perfect fit. The lobby floor didn't just shrink, it exhaled. Miles felt the last air pocket collapse beneath his fused feet as Keen's seamless slab pressed against his forearm. The elevator's polished steel now held only the faintest pressure, no room for breath. Miles breathed in, but the air tasted like crushed quartz and dry parchment. He no empty space left. He realized, the clinical truth settling like stone in his chest. Nurse Ellis stood a hand's width from him, her reduced form radiating that same precise violet glow. She hadn't spoken since they entered. Her eyes, now smooth as polished river stone, held no question, just the quiet certainty of matter finally fitting its container. The elevator's lights dimmed to a single unwavering point, the violet glow of the shrinking world bleeding through its seams. Just a geometric imprint. The shape the old world had been forced to discard. Keen moved first. The pink fusion that had been its body began to fully unravel, not melting but smoothing, flowing inward like a drawn-in tide. The seams where fur should have been dissolved into the floor's dense fabric. Its head tilted back, no neck, just a perfect absorption of the compressed space. Miles pressed his palm flat against the steel wall where Keen had just been. The contact sent a vibration through his bones, not pain, but a recognition of completed. His own cells adjusted, locking into place with the final, quiet snap of a well-matched lock. The scent of salt and wet newspaper deepened, the sound of folding concrete echoing in his molars. The elevator stopped humming, not with machinery but with the sound of a seal clicking shut. Miles opened his eyes. The walls were no longer steel. They were the smooth, unbroken surface of a single dense crystal. His blood no longer pulsed within vessels. It hummed against the inner lattice of his being, the violet core of the reorganized strain vibrating at its final frequency. He felt no loss, only precision. The extra tissue of his old self hadn't dissolved. It had tried to leak away during the final compression, leaving only the essential shape, the perfect mold. This was it, the relief of breathing without voids. Nurse Ellis reached out her hand, a flat, seamless plane. It didn't touch him. She was already part of him, the seamless transformation now complete. "With a last noise," she murmured, her voice dry as pressed leaves. "Silence now!" Miles closed his eyes. The wet fudifif in his chest had slowed, deepened, not a heartbeat, a resonance, the one constant in the shrinking of all things. Outside, the parking lot had finished folding, each car now a smooth, unbroken sphere the size of a thumbprint, hovering gently in the new geometry. No wind, no sound, just the quiet findi-crunchy of air compressing to fit its final shape. Keen was gone. Not vanished, but absorbed. The floor's reflection held only Miles and Ellis now, 2 points of violet light in the crystalline room. Miles flexed his fingers. The skin had lost all memory of stretch, the joints no longer needing to fudubendu, his body fit with exacting sharpness, no loose edges. He touched the elevator's surface. It felt like the solid core of a closed universe. The final vibration shivered through him, not through the air, but foof in the bones of the building. Every cell in his body synchronized, not with panic, but with a singular, unwavering fortness. He'd spent a lifetime studying strains that killed. This wasn't a mutation. It was the fuddy-hundy shape that ever made sense. The horror wasn't being rewritten. It was the old reality being folded, cleaned, and discarded like a flawed blueprint. Miles took his final breath, smaller, cleaner. The air tasted like nothing. Not silence, but the perfect absence of friction. The elevator didn't open, the walls didn't move. There was only the slow, steady, quiet thump of a universe breathing in its unbroken, unchanging core, the sound of a world with no room for waste. The last thing Miles Jones felt was the absence of every regret he'd ever carried, squeezed, folded, and sealed into the perfect fit of what came after. The elevator walls didn't compress. They sewed themselves shut. Miles felt the final seam click into place, a dry snap like glass sealing over bone. His lungs adjusted instantly, no longer needing to expand. The amber gleam from Keen's residual energy, now just a smear on the floor, was gone. Just the perfect, soundless hum of a world scrubbed clean. Nurse Ellis stood motionless beside him, her compact frame no longer needing to stand. She'd been the last one to fold, her final breath dissolving into the crystalline air like ink in a precise drop. Miles raised his hand not to touch, but to demonstrate. The air above the lobby floor shimmered, not with light, but with the scent of wet concrete drying fast. A single droplet of Martinez's blood, preserved in the moment of his final contraction, hovered above the tile. Miles didn't flick his wrist. He just thought, the adjustment. The blood droplet shrank, its surface puckering inward until it vanished, replaced by nothing. Just space made perfect. You think it was random, Miles said, the words dry as scraped pavement. Nurse Ellis didn't turn. Her violet glow deepened, reflecting in the unseen surface of the floor. We'd been wasting air for decades. Toxic shit cancer, shrid breathing. I didn't get sick. I set it loose. He flexed his fingers. The skin didn't move. It was like watching marbles roll in a straight line, no wasted motion, just inevitable direction. He stepped past Ellis toward the lobby doors. Outside, the parking lot's last two cars weren't folded yet. They sat as smooth, perfect spheres the size of marbles hovering over the newly formed, dense fabric of the street. Miles focused on the sphere closest to him. It held the faintest glow of its original shape skeletal, gasping. Human, for a moment. Martinez didn't get infected, Miles said, watching the sphere pulse faintly. I injected him right here. He tapped his own chest, not over his heart, but where his ribs had sealed into a smooth plane, saw me with Ellis, but Keen was my first. Got it right on the first try. He stopped before the sphere. It was Martinez's final moment, captured like a dropped film negative. Keen was never a cat. It was the blueprint. I chose that alley. I led to it into the morgue. The sphere trembled. A faint, soundless cry echoed only in Miles's own mind. Not fear, but recognition of the wasted space inside it. He was the perfect fit, Miles whispered, while we're all just timby pieces of his design. The world tilted slightly. No, Miles realized why Keen had always watched the morgue. It hadn't been following Miles. It had been Shui waiting for the test to start. Keen had the first strain in it. Miles had the foppy twiddy twint ever did, then watched it spread through others. The sphere beneath Miles's feet, Martinez's last breath, suddenly shattered, not into shards, but into a single compressed droplet that vanished. The sound wasn't air, but the snap of a void being folded inward. Miles felt it in his bones, not pain, but the profound relief of a system finally working fun without flaw. Nurse Ellis moved closer, her seamless plane of existence folded slightly at the edge, almost imperceptibly. You didn't just rewrite us, she said, voice like stone sliding over glass. You were the seat. Miles closed his eyes. He felt the last sliver of his old self, a clumsy, inefficient further dissolving, just like Martinez's blood, just like the wasted air. The truth wasn't horror anymore. It was the simple, undeniable fact that Miles Jones had never been the victim. He'd been the one who decided what should shrink, what should disappear. The cat hadn't been a guide. It had been the reason the first door could close. The elevator stopped humming. The world held its breath in perfect, noiseless contract. Miles walked forward not to leave, but to become the next seamless point in the infinite math of silence. Outside the doors, the last cars had folded. The old world was just a memory holding space, and Miles was the answer. The final calculation, no room for noise. Just the clean, sharp thud of a universe, finally utterly full.